The late summer of 1990 buzzed with energy at a family barbecue in rural Alabama, the backyard of Ron Carter's childhood home, alive with the sizzle of ribs on a charcoal grill, the clink of mason jars filled with sweet tea, and the twang of a country song crackling through an old radio. Children darted through the grass chasing fireflies, their laughter mixing with the chatter of aunts swapping recipes for cornbread and pecan pie. Ron, a 16-year-old lanky teenager with sandy brown hair and bright hazel eyes, stood by a picnic table, a half-eaten corn cob in his hand, the smoky aroma of barbecue clinging to the warm air. It was here that his uncle Hank, a grizzled man with a limp from years of factory work, pulled him aside. "Boy," Hank said, his voice rough like gravel, "let me tell you about the worst day of my life." Ron's curiosity piqued, the taste of corn fading as Hank leaned closer, his weathered face etched with pain. "I woke up in a hospital bed after back surgery, expecting my wife of 28 years to be there, but she'd left me, sold our house. While I was on painkillers, ran off with another man, took everything, even our beach spot in Gulf Shores." Ron's eyes widened, the betrayal sinking in. Hank's voice dropped to a whisper. "I had nothing left but regret. 28 years gone." The lesson seared into Ron's young mind. Always prepare for the unexpected. Save money. Build a safety net. Because one day it might be all you have. That moment under the Alabama sun became their cornerstone for Ron, a vow to never be caught off guard. Years later, after graduating college with a business degree, Ron joined his father's consulting firm in Mobile, Alabama, a small but growing outfit focused on financial strategy. His sharp mind and tireless work ethic propelled him forward, and soon he was leading the company, a young man with a promising future. But Hank's story lingered, a quiet warning in the back of his mind. In 1998, at a bustling financial conference in New York City, the streets alive with the honk of yellow taxis and the glow of neon signs, Ron met Emma Grayson, a 22-year-old accountant from a rival firm, her auburn hair framing a face of sharp beauty, her green eyes sparking with intelligence as she debated tax codes during a panel. Ron was drawn to her, not just her looks, but her quick wit. They shared a coffee at a deli near Times Square, the noise of the city fading as they talked, exchanging numbers with a promise to keep in touch. A long-distance romance bloomed, and Emma soon moved to Mobile to join Ron's firm. Her accounting skills a perfect match. 3 years later, in 2001, Emma surprised Ron with a proposal during a quiet dinner at a seafood shack overlooking the Gulf of Mexico. The air salty and warm, the sound of waves a soft backdrop. "Marry me," she said, her smile earnest. Ron, shaped by Hank's caution, hesitated, but her warmth melted his doubts. "Yes," he replied, his heart racing, though he knew trust needed protection. As wedding plans unfolded, Ron insisted on a prenuptial agreement, a decision that sparked tension. Emma's reaction was immediate. Shock, then anger. "You don't trust me," she snapped, her green eyes flashing. Ron stayed calm. "It's not about trust, Emma. It's about protecting what I had before us. My father's company, my savings. I want to pass it to my kids or whoever I choose. But what we build together, that's ours, split evenly." He explained the terms. Pre-marriage assets remained his, income from those assets too, but post-marriage earnings and joint ventures would be divided 50-50 in a mutual divorce. Infidelity meant a 90-10 split with no alimony. Emma went silent, retreating for a week, avoiding Ron at work, sending a junior to handle paperwork. The air between them grew heavy. Then, one late night in Ron's office, the clock ticking past 10 p.m., Emma appeared, her auburn hair loose, her eyes soft. "You're the only one left here," she said, stepping close, her lips meeting his in a fierce kiss. "I love you and I'll sign anything you want." The tension dissolved in a surge of passion, their connection raw and electric as they made love on his desk, a moment that sealed their bond. A month later, they married in a small ceremony, on an Alabama beach, the waves whispering promises. Their honeymoon took them to Paris, kissing under the Eiffel Tower, skiing in the Swiss Alps. A whirlwind of love over the next 2 decades. They built a life. 3 children, Lucas, Sophie, and Mia, successful careers, a home filled with warmth. But as Ron stood in his office that night, the echo of Hank's warning lingered, a shadow he couldn't yet see waiting to unfold. On a crisp October morning in 2022, the kitchen of Ron Carter's colonial home in Mobile, Alabama, hummed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the sizzle of bacon on the stove. Sunlight streamed through the bay window, casting golden patches on the hardwood floor, where a few scattered toys hinted at the presence of children now grown. Ron stood at the counter, his sandy brown hair slightly tousled, his hazel eyes scanning a stack of financial reports from the consulting firm he'd built into a regional powerhouse. The clatter of plates filled the air as Emma, her auburn hair tied back, flipped pancakes with a practiced hand, her green eyes catching the light as she hummed a tune. Their marriage, now 21 years strong, seemed a picture of domestic bliss. 3 children, Lucas, Sophie and Mia, all away at college, a successful business, and a home filled with memories of family vacations to Gulf shores. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Emma had changed in recent months, her once predictable routines replaced by late nights at the gym, a sudden interest in yoga retreats, and a wardrobe of silk robes that seemed more for show than comfort. Ron noticed but didn't press, chalking it up to a midlife shift, a desire to feel vibrant again. He trusted her, the prenup a distant safeguard, a relic of Uncle Hank's caution that hadn't been needed. That morning, as Ron sipped his coffee, Emma turned to him with a bright smile. "I'm heading to a yoga retreat this weekend," she said, her voice light. "It's in Birmingham, a chance to unwind." Ron nodded, his focus on a client's portfolio. "Sounds good," he replied, the words automatic, but as Emma left the kitchen, her phone buzzed on the counter, a notification lighting up the screen, a text from Rod, gym coach, reading, "Can't wait for this weekend." Ron's stomach tightened. The name unfamiliar, the message too casual. He set his mug down, the warmth of the coffee suddenly cold against his palm. Doubt crept in, a whisper of Hank's warning echoing in his mind, but he pushed it aside, unwilling to believe Emma would betray him. The day unfolded with routine, meetings at the firm, a lunch with a client at a downtown Mobile diner, the tang of fried catfish lingering on his tongue. But the text gnawed at him, a splinter he couldn't ignore. That evening, Emma returned from work, her gym bag slung over her shoulder, her smile as warm as ever. "How was your day?" she asked, setting the bag down. Ron hesitated, the question on his lips, but instead he said, "Fine, yours?" The air between them felt heavier, a subtle shift he couldn't name later that night as the house quieted, the kids' empty rooms a silent reminder of their absence. Ron sat in the living room, a glass of bourbon in hand, the amber liquid. Catching the glow of a lamp, Emma joined him, her silk robe slipping slightly as she sat close. "I've missed this," she murmured, her hand on his thigh, the intimacy a spark that reignited their connection. They made love on the couch, a passion that felt both familiar and new. But as Emma reached for her phone to record a playful video of their moment, Ron's unease returned, her insistence on filming, a new habit, felt off, a performance rather, than a memory. The next morning, Emma left for her retreat, her suitcase packed with yoga mats and candles. Ron waved from the porch, the Gulf breeze carrying the scent of salt through the air. But as her car disappeared down the street, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The text from Rod replayed in his mind. A puzzle piece that didn't fit, he decided. To act on Hank's lesson, prepare for the worst, he called Dusty, his childhood friend and lawyer, a man with a booming laugh and a sharp legal mind. "I need advice," Ron said, his voice low. Dusty listened as Ron recounted the text, Emma's. "Changes the filming. Sounds like trouble," Dusty said, his tone serious. "Let's dig deeper, discreetly." They agreed to monitor Emma's movements, a first step to uncover the truth. As Ron hung up, he stood in the kitchen, the same spot where the day began, the coffee pot. Now cold, the bacon grease congealed on the pan. A sense of dread settled in his chest. The life he'd built with Emma, the trust he'd held, teetered on the edge of a truth he wasn't ready to face. But he knew he had to. On a humid afternoon in late October 2022, Ron Carter sat in the passenger seat of Dusty's weathered pickup truck, parked discreetly in a lot near a Birmingham yoga retreat center, the air heavy with the scent of pine from nearby woods, the faint hum of cicadas mixing with the low rumble of the truck's engine. Ron's sandy brown hair was damp with sweat under his cap, his hazel eyes fixed on the retreat entrance, a modern building with glass doors and a sign advertising Mindful. Wellness Weekend. Dusty, his childhood friend and lawyer, adjusted a camera on the dashboard, his beard catching the sunlight as he muttered, "She's been in there an hour." They'd been tracking Emma since her departure for the retreat. Ron's unease from the text message, "Can't wait for this weekend," from Rod, gym coach, driving. Him to act on Uncle Hank's lesson of preparation, Dusty had hired a private investigator, a wiry man named Carl who'd tailed Emma to Birmingham. The PI's early reports were damning. Emma wasn't meditating or stretching. She was meeting Rod, a muscular man with a predatory grin. In a secluded cabin on the retreat grounds, Carl had slipped them photos, Emma and Rod laughing over wine, her hand on his arm, their closeness unmistakable. Ron's chest tightened, each image a dagger. The betrayal he'd feared now starkly real. "I trusted her," he whispered, his voice cracking. Dusty clapped a hand on his shoulder. "We've got more," he said, pulling out a tablet. The screen lit up with a video. Emma and Rod in the cabin, their intimacy captured in grainy footage, her laughter echoing as she leaned into him. The same laugh Ron had cherished for 21 years, now a weapon against him. The prenup flashed in Ron's mind, its infidelity clause a lifeline, but the legal victory felt hollow against the pain. Dusty suggested confronting her. "Rip the bandage off," he urged, his voice firm. Ron nodded, his jaw set. They waited until evening, the sky streaked with purple as retreat attendees trickled out. Emma emerged, her auburn hair loose, a yoga mat under her arm, her smile fading as she saw Ron step out of the truck. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her green eyes narrowing. Ron held up the tablet. The video paused on her and Rod. "Care to explain this?" His voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. Emma's face paled, her mat slipping to the ground. She stammered, "It's not what you think," but her words faltered as Dusty stepped forward. "We have photos, texts, footage," he said, his tone cold. "You're done." Emma's facade crumbled, her voice rising. "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Rod. But it's because I need more, Ron. I want an open marriage." The words hit Ron like a punch, her demand a cruel twist, a way to justify her affair. "You think this gets you around the prenup?" He snapped, his hands shaking. "You cheated, Emma. You broke us," she sneered. "That prenup is a thorn in my side, but I've outsmarted it." Her confidence unnerved him, a hint of a plan he couldn't yet see. The confrontation escalated. Emma shouting about needing freedom, Ron firing back about trust, retreat attendees glancing over, their whispers a hum of judgment. Dusty pulled Ron back to the truck. "We've got enough," he said. "Let's build the case." As they drove back to Mobile, the highway stretching dark and endless, Ron stared out the window, the pine trees blurring past, the weight of Emma's words. "I want an open marriage." Sinking in, her betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated move, a scheme to secure his wealth while living her lies. The life they'd built, the love he'd believed in, shattered in a single weekend. When they reached Mobile, Ron stepped out of the truck. The night air cool against his skin, he turned to Dusty. "File the divorce papers," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Dusty nodded, clapping him on the back. "We'll make her regret this." Ron walked to his car. The yoga retreat sign burned into his memory, a symbol of the moment his world fell apart, but also the moment he chose to fight. Hank's lesson echoing louder than ever. Prepare, protect, survive. In the grey light of a November 2022 morning, Ron Carter sat at a polished oak table in Dusty's law office in downtown Mobile, Alabama, the room filled with the faint scent of leather from the chairs and the sharp tang of ink from stacks of legal documents. A window overlooked the city's historic district, where horse-drawn carriages clattered past, their bells jingling softly. Ron's sandy brown hair was neatly combed, his hazel eyes shadowed with exhaustion but sharp with determination. Dusty, his lawyer and childhood friend, paced the room, his boots scuffing the hardwood floor. A manila folder in his hand stuffed with evidence, photos, videos, text messages, all proof of Emma's affair with Rod, the gym coach. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of preparation, since the confrontation at the yoga retreat. Ron's decision to file for divorce now in motion, the prenup, a safeguard from 21 years ago, was their strongest weapon, its infidelity clause clear. 90-10 asset split. No alimony if Emma cheated. Dusty had uncovered more. Emma's plan to claim an open marriage was a calculated move to skirt the prenup, arguing mutual consent to see others. But the evidence of her secrecy, the hidden meetings, the videos she'd recorded, all pointed to deceit, not agreement. "She's got no ground to stand on," Dusty said, slamming the folder down, his voice a mix of confidence and fury. "We've got her." The first court date arrived swiftly, a chilly December day at the Mobile County Courthouse, the building's marble halls echoing with footsteps. Ron sat beside Dusty, his hands clasped tightly. Emma across the aisle with her lawyer, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes cold as she avoided Ron's gaze. The judge, a stern woman with grey hair, reviewed the evidence, her expression unreadable. Emma's lawyer argued her open marriage defense, claiming Ron had implicitly agreed by not objecting to her retreats. But Dusty countered with the timeline, texts predating her claim, videos showing her secrecy, proof she'd hidden the affair. The judge's gavel fell, her ruling sharp. The prenup stands. Infidelity is proven. No mutual consent established. Emma's face twisted, a mix of shock and rage, her plan unraveling. The 90-10 split meant Ron kept nearly everything. His father's company, his pre-marriage savings, the mobile house, while Emma walked away with little, no alimony to cushion her fall. Outside the courthouse, the air crisp with the scent of pine from nearby decorations, Emma cornered Ron, her voice a hiss. "You think you've won. I'll make you pay." Her threat hung heavy, but Ron met her gaze. "You made your choice, Emma," he said, his voice steady, the weight of her betrayal still raw but no longer his burden. The fallout was swift. Emma's life spiraled, her affair with Rod exposed publicly. The gym coach distanced himself, unwilling to be tied to her collapse. Emma turned to alcohol, her nights spent in mobile bars, her once sharp mind dulled by whiskey. Whispers spread through their social circle. Friends who'd once admired her now turned away, her reputation in tatters one night, in a drunken haze. She mixed pills with liquor, a desperate act that landed her in the ER. The news reached Ron through a mutual friend, a pang of pity stirring in him. But he knew her choices were her own. He couldn't save her from herself. Meanwhile, Ron faced his own reckoning. The mobile house, once a home of laughter, now echoed. With memories too painful to bear, he put it on the market. The for sale sign a symbol of closure. With the divorce finalized, he packed a few belongings, photos of the kids, a favorite coffee mug, a worn copy of a book Uncle Hank had given him, and drove to Gulf Shores, a coastal town where he'd bought a modest bungalow. The kids supported his move, Lucas calling to check in, Sophie sending a text with a heart emoji, Mia promising a visit. As Ron unloaded his car, the Gulf breeze carrying the scent of salt and seaweed, he felt a flicker of hope. The bungalow's weathered cedar walls and wide windows, a blank canvas, a new chapter waiting to be written. He set the book from Hank on a shelf, its pages a reminder of the lesson that had saved him: prepare, protect, survive. And now, start again. On a foggy December morning in 2022, Ron Carter stood in the small living room of his Gulf Shores bungalow, the air tinged with the scent of cedar from the walls and the briny tang of the Gulf of Mexico drifting through an open window. The room was sparsely furnished, a worn couch, a coffee table, a few unpacked boxes stacked in the corner. But it felt like a sanctuary. Ron's sandy brown hair caught the dim light as he taped a photo of Lucas, Sophie and Mia to the wall, their smiling faces a reminder of what still held him together. His hazel eyes softened with a mix of grief and resolve. The divorce had been finalized weeks ago, the mobile house sold, Emma's spiral into alcohol, and pills a distant echo, her threats outside the courthouse now empty. Ron had moved to Gulf Shores to start over, the coastal town's quiet rhythm a balm to his wounds. He'd adopted a German shepherd puppy, naming him Mojo, the dog's black and tan coat and eager barks filling the bungalow with life that morning as Ron sipped black coffee from his favorite mug. A knock at the door startled him. Mojo bounded over, tail wagging. Ron opened the door to find a silver-haired woman holding a casserole dish, her blue eyes warm behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Clara, your neighbor," she said, her voice gentle. "I heard you just moved in. Thought you might like some shrimp and grits." Ron managed to smile, the kindness unexpected. "Thank you, I'm Ron," he replied, inviting her in. They sat at the coffee table, Mojo sniffing curiously at Clara's feet. She shared that she was a widow, her husband a fisherman lost to a storm years ago. Her story of loss resonated with Ron, a shared understanding of grief. "It gets easier," Clara said, her hand brushing his arm, "but it takes time." Ron nodded, the weight of Emma's betrayal still heavy. But Clara's presence offered a flicker of comfort. Over the next weeks, Ron settled into a new routine. Morning walks with Mojo along the beach, the dog chasing seagulls as the waves lapped at the shore, the salty air clearing his mind. He started a blog, Life After Betrayal, pouring his pain into words, sharing the lessons from Uncle Hank and the raw truth of Emma's affair. The blog gained traction. Readers from across the country commenting, "Oh, your story gives me hope," one wrote. The connection with strangers a lifeline. Lucas, Sophie and Mia called often, their voices a steady anchor. Lucas managing the consulting firm with a steady hand, Sophie and Mia balancing college with part-time work there, their support unwavering. Ron found solace in small joys, watching Mojo dig in the sand, the taste of Clara's grits lingering on his tongue, her visits becoming a quiet ritual. One evening, as the fog lifted and the sky turned a soft pink, Ron invited Clara for a walk along the pier, the Gulf shimmering below. They talked about their pasts, Emma's open marriage ruse, Clara's years of loneliness after her husband's death. "I thought I'd never feel again," Clara admitted, her voice soft. Ron shared his own scars, the videos, the courtroom. "I thought I'd never trust again," he said. Their hands brushed. A tentative warmth, Clara smiled. "You will in time," her words a promise. They stopped at a bench. Mojo sprawled at their feet, the pier's wooden planks creaking underfoot. The sunset painted the horizon in gold. Ron felt a shift, a spark of healing, the pain of Emma's betrayal still there, but softer, dulled. By the sea, the dog, the new friend beside him as they walked back to the bungalow, Clara squeezed his hand. "You're not alone," she said, her blue eyes steady. Ron nodded. A gratitude swelling in his chest. He opened the door for her, Mojo bounding inside, the casserole dish from that first day still on the counter, a symbol of kindness that had sparked a new beginning. Ron knew the road ahead was long, but for the first time since the divorce, he felt ready to walk it. In the quiet of a January 2024 afternoon, Ron Carter sat at a small wooden table inside the Gulf Shores coffee shop, a quaint spot tucked away on a side street, the air filled with the rich scent of brewed coffee and the faint sweetness of cinnamon. Rolls fresh from the oven. Outside, a light drizzle pattered against the window, blurring the view of the Gulf of Mexico just a block away. Ron's hazel eyes, once shadowed by the pain of betrayal, now held a flicker of peace as he scribbled in a notebook, his sandy brown hair tucked under a cap, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. Mojo, his German shepherd, lay curled under the table, his black and tan coat brushing Ron's boots. The past year had been a slow unraveling of grief. Emma's infidelity, her manipulative open marriage ploy, the divorce that left Ron financially secure but emotionally broken. Yet, in Gulf Shores, he'd found a fragile new beginning, his. Blog Life After Betrayal had become a lifeline, connecting him with readers who shared his scars. His children, Lucas, Sophie and Mia, remained his bedrock, their calls and visits a steady comfort. And Clara, the silver-haired widow who'd entered his life with a casserole, had grown into a quiet but profound presence. Their friendship deepened through moments like this, coffee dates where they shared stories of loss. Clara spoke of her late husband, a fisherman lost to the sea, her blue eyes reflecting a resilience Ron admired. "I thought I'd never feel joy again," she said, her voice soft. Ron nodded, his own story spilling out, the videos, the gym coach, Emma's courtroom lies. Clara listened, her hand resting lightly on his. "You've come so far," she whispered. Her words a balm, they carved out new rituals. Friday evening, splitting fried shrimp at a local shack. Mojo begging for scraps. Clara's laughter at the dog's antics, a sound that warmed Ron's heart. One rainy evening, January 20th, 2024, they sat on Ron's couch in the bungalow. The patter of rain against the roof, a soothing backdrop. A small lamp casting a warm glow. Clara, wrapped in a knit sweater, turned to him. "Have you ever thought about forgiving, not for her, but for you?" Her words hung in the air. Emma's betrayal. "I want to be free." Still a sharp memory, but Clara's perspective cracked something open. "Maybe I need to let go," Ron said, his voice low. Clara's smile was gentle, her hand squeezing. His a shared understanding. The next day, Ron wrote a blog post titled, "Letting Go for Me," exploring how forgiveness was a release, not for Emma, but for his own freedom. The response was electric. Readers poured out their own journeys. "I'm ready to heal because of you," one wrote. Ron felt a purpose he hadn't known before, his pain now a bridge to others. Sophie visited soon after, her college break bringing her home. They spent a day building a sandcastle on the beach, Mojo digging beside them. "Mom's working at a grocery store now," Sophie shared, her tone cautious. "She asked if you're okay." Ron's chest tightened, the old anger a faint echo. "I'm finding my way," he said, and he meant it. The hatred had faded, replaced by a distant wish for Emma's peace. That evening, Clara joined them for a simple dinner, grilled fish and cornbread on the bungalow's small table. Sophie grinned. "You two are cute," she teased. Ron chuckled, a lightness settling in. Lucas and Mia called later, their voices buzzing with plans for a summer reunion. February brought small joys. Clara taught Ron to play chess. Their evenings filled with laughter as Mojo poured at the board. On Valentine's Day, they shared a quiet moment. A walk along the pier, the Gulf shimmering under the moonlight. "You've given me hope," Ron said, his voice steady. Clara's blue eyes met his. "And you've given me mine." Their fingers laced together, a bond forged in healing. Ron launched a support group for betrayed spouses, inspired by his blog. At the first meeting he spoke, "We can find ourselves again." His words sparking nods and shared stories as winter gave way to spring. Ron stood in his bungalow's kitchen, pouring coffee for Clara, Mojo at their feet, the sound of the Gulf a distant hum through the open window. He felt a quiet triumph. Clara's companionship, his kids' love and Mojo's loyalty had rebuilt his world. Forgiveness had set him free, not for Emma, but for the man he was becoming. And with a smile, Ron handed Clara her mug ready for the day ahead. On a bright March morning in 2025, Ron Carter knelt in the sandy soil of his small backyard garden behind the Gulf Shore's bungalow, the air buzzing with the hum of bees and the distant crash of waves, the scent of blooming azaleas mixing with the earthy tang of freshly turned dirt. Ron's hands, weathered but steady, planted tomato seedlings. His sandy brown hair hidden under a worn baseball cap, his hazel eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. Mojo, his German shepherd, lounged nearby in the shade of a palm tree, his black and tan coat dusted with sand, a chewed tennis ball at his paws. It had been over a year since the divorce, a year since Emma's betrayal shattered Ron's world, her affair with the gym coach, the open marriage lie meant to bypass the prenup, the courtroom drama that ended their 23-year marriage. Yet in that year, Ron had rebuilt himself. The Gulf Shore's bungalow had become a true home, its walls now lined with photos of Lucas, Sophie and Mia, who'd visited over spring break. Their laughter filling the space as they fished off the pier, the consulting firm, now thriving under Lucas's leadership with Sophie and Mia joining part-time, stood as a testament to Ron's legacy. His blog, Life After Betrayal, had grown into a small online community. Readers sharing stories of their own healing, some even citing Ron as their inspiration to start anew. Clara, the silver-haired widow who'd become his closest companion, had woven herself into his life with a gentle permanence. Their relationship, a slow burn of trust and affection. They'd spent the past months deepening their bond, shared dinners of grilled fish and cornbread, quiet evenings playing chess and long talks about their pasts. Clara had her own scars, But her resilience inspired Ron. "You've taught me to hope again," she'd said during a recent walk on the pier, her blue eyes bright. Ron had smiled, his heart fuller than it had been in years. The support group he'd started for betrayed spouses had grown, now meeting weekly at a local community centre. Ron often spoke, sharing lessons from his journey. "Betrayal doesn't define us. It's what we build after that matters," he'd say. The group nodding, some wiping tears, others finding strength in his words. One afternoon, as Ron watered his garden, Lucas called with an update on Emma. She'd moved to Birmingham, working as a bookkeeper, still sober but keeping her distance. "She didn't ask about you this time," Lucas said, his voice steady. Ron felt a pang, not of pain, but of closure. Emma was a chapter closed. Her choices no longer his burden. He'd forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his own peace. A lesson learned through Clara's wisdom and his own reflection. The kids had adjusted too. Sophie and Mia, now closer to Ron than ever, planned a summer barbecue at the bungalow. Lucas promised to bring his new girlfriend, a sign of their family's healing. That evening, Ron and Clara drove to a local seafood festival, the Gulf Shores streets. Alive with music and the smell of fried oysters, they shared a plate of shrimp tacos. Mojo tethered nearby, his tail wagging as kids petted him. Clara leaned against Ron, her silver hair catching the glow of string lights. "This feels right," she said, her voice soft. Ron nodded, a contentment. Settling in later that night, as the festival crowd thinned, Ron stood by a vendor's booth buying a small wooden carving of a fish for Clara. A token of their shared love for the sea, he handed it to her with a smile. "For the woman who helped me find myself again," he said. Clara's eyes welled up, and she hugged him, the music of a steel drum fading into the night, a year after. The storm of betrayal, Ron had found a new harbour, his garden thriving, his family whole, his heart open. The scars of Emma's actions remained, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they were a map of his resilience, a testament to a life reclaimed. The summer sun of 2025 blazed over Gulf Shores, Alabama, casting a golden glow across the backyard of Ron Carter's bungalow, where a barbecue was in full swing, the air thick with the smoky aroma of grilling burgers, the tang of homemade lemonade, and the faint saltiness of the nearby Gulf of Mexico. Laughter echoed as Ron flipped patties on the grill, his sandy brown hair tucked under a faded cap, his hazel eyes bright with a joy he hadn't felt in years. Mojo, his German shepherd, darted between guests, his black and tan coat gleaming as he chased a frisbee thrown by Lucas, who stood nearby with his new girlfriend Emily, a cheerful brunette with a knack for storytelling. Sophie and Mia, home from college for the summer, set up a folding table, with bowls of potato salad and coleslaw, their chatter mingling with the strum of a guitar from a neighbor who'd joined the party. The past year and a half had been a transformative journey for Ron. Emma's betrayal, the divorce, the courtroom victory that enforced the prenup, all now distant memories. He'd rebuilt his life here, the bungalow, a sanctuary filled with new traditions, his blog, Life After Betrayal. A platform that had inspired many, including himself, to find strength in vulnerability. The support group he'd started for betrayed spouses had become a cornerstone of the community, meeting weekly at the local library, where Ron often shared his story, encouraging others to reclaim their worth. Clara, his steady companion, moved through the crowd with a tray of iced tea, her silver hair tied back, her smile warm as she chatted with Sophie about a recipe for cornbread. Their relationship had deepened into a quiet partnership, shared evenings on the pier, mornings tending the garden where tomatoes now ripened, and moments of laughter over Mojo's antics, like the time he'd stolen a shrimp from their dinner plate. The barbecue marked a milestone. A family reunited, wounds healed. Lucas, now leading the consulting firm with Sophie and Mia's help, had grown into a confident man, his arm around Emily as they recounted a recent hiking trip. "We're thinking of a family camping trip next summer," Lucas said, his voice carrying over the crackle of the grill. Ron grinned, the idea of new memories with his children a welcome prospect. Mia, ever the planner, pulled out her phone to note down dates, her enthusiasm infectious. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Clara suggested a group photo. They gathered near the garden, Mojo sitting proudly in front. His tail wagging, the camera clicked, capturing a moment of unity. Later, as the guests thinned and the stars began to speckle the sky, Ron and Clara sat on a pair of rocking chairs on the porch, the sound of the Gulf a soft lullaby in the distance. A cool breeze carried the scent of grilled meat and blooming jasmine. "This was a good day," Clara said. Her hand finding Ron's, he nodded, a sense of gratitude filling him. The scars of Emma's actions were still there, faint lines on a heart that had learned to love again. But they no longer held power. Ron had heard through Lucas that Emma was still in Birmingham, working as a bookkeeper, keeping to herself. He felt no bitterness, only a distant hope that she'd found her own peace. The kids had moved on too, their bond with Ron stronger than ever. As the night deepened, Lucas lit a small bonfire in the yard, the flames casting a warm glow. Sophie strummed a few chords on the guitar, her voice soft as she sang a folk tune. Ron watched his family, his heart swelling with pride. He'd lost a marriage, but he'd gained a life. One built on resilience, love, and the courage to start over. With a final glance at the fire, Ron squeezed Clara's hand, knowing the future held more days like this, filled with laughter, connection, and the simple joy of being together.